So, guys, I don't know. I think this disconnected and I just turned it on again. Was the audience hearing me before? Literally, the browser did something strange, so I don't know if it's. Oh, okay. I think it's back somehow. All right. Let's continue with the quote tunnel. Annie Dillard says crystals grew inside rock like arithmetic flowers. They lengthened and spread, added plane to plane in an odd and perfect obedience to an absolute geometry that even stones, maybe only the stones, understood. Incredible sentence. Anytime what I like to call an author gets an iridescent emotion they capture, like an unusual angle to the moment that nobody's seen, I think that deserves honor. Shia LaBeouf, this what do you call it? Let me read the quote first, people. Okay, never mind. This quote we can move past this. Vivienne Westwood, I've got a real sense of three-dimensional geometry. I can look at a flat piece of fabric and know that if I put a slit in it and make some fabric travel around the square, then when you lift it up, it will drape in a certain way. And I can feel how that will happen. A relationship, like our emotions, geometry could really could bring insight to the emotion of man. Maybe on some level, all our emotions is because we want everything to be perfectly shaped, or we in some sense can't comprehend its perfect shape. Vidal Sassoon. Oh, sorry, let me finish the thing. Oh, no, I read it. Vidal Sassoon says, we learn to put discipline in the haircuts by using actual geometry, actual architectural shapes and bone structure. The cut had to be perfect and layered beautifully so that when a woman shook it, it just fell back. Oh, okay. See, it's even in the fashion industry, guys. They're using geometry. It's like their whole like life. In some sense. Robert M. Persick says one geometry cannot be more true than another. It can only be more convenient. Geometry is not true, it is advantageous. Okay, so this guy's saying the same thing, so the quotes could be confused or something. Albrecht Dürer Dürer says, and since geometry is the right foundation of all painting, I've decided to teach its rudiments and principles to all youngsters eager for art. Gerhard Herzberg says the citation of the 1971 Nobel Prize in Chemistry reads, for contribution to the knowledge of electronic structures and geometry of molecules, especially free radicals, and therefore implies that the prize has been awarded for a long series of studies extending practically over my whole scientific life. E.W. Howe says, it is hard to convince a high school student that he will encounter a lot of problems more difficult than those of algebra and geometry. Carl Friedrich Gauss. So Gauss was an incredible mathematician, guys. He was pretty much the Mozart of mathematics. Carl Friedrich Gauss says, I am coming more and more to the conviction that the necessity of our geometry cannot be demonstrated, at least neither by nor for the human intellect. I don't know if I shared this, but it's something that geometry is a mystery. Paul Samuelson says, my family was well off but not rich. I spent the 4 years I was an undergraduate working on the beach, and it wasn't because I was lazy. It was because my freshman class would go to 100 different employers and wouldn't get a nibble. That was a disequilibrium system. I realized that the ordinary old-fashioned Euclidean geometry didn't apply. Okay. thought the quotes were going to be more badass than this. This is, quotes weren't geometric enough. Okay, there we go. Johann Kepler. Geometry is the archetype of the beauty of the world. I have no idea what he meant by archetype back then. Geometry is the archetype of the beauty of the world. Precondition, perhaps he means in some context. Pythagoras says there is geometry in the humming of the streams. There's music in the spacing of the spheres. I read that. Plato says geometry will draw the soul toward truth and create the spirit of philosophy. Exactly. When you see, kind of free flow geometrical movement in your inner realms, it definitely makes you wonder about things. And what does that mean? That means you can visualize a geometric shape moving, and why can you do that? That's the question. That's the question that should make the children of the future generations jump out of their chair, for there's great mysteries that are at the kingdom's door. For humanity has come far, but it is the beginning. It is the beginning. We have interstellar visions here. Johann Kepler says, where there is matter, there is geometry. Very interesting. Very interesting. What the definition of matter is the issue. What if the matter of it makes perfect sense. It's a design-oriented existence. So your experience and existence, their common denominator is design. There we go. Geometry is your breath between your reality and imagination. There's a geometry is the bridge between the mind and your soul. The body and the kind of soul. The concept of the mind is there as long as there is individualism, but after a point where the person wonders, for how many eons is it going to be just individual consciousness, then you kind of experientially shift yourself. And we want to become advanced communicators. What that means is those 4 dimensions I spoke to you about, the ring of the absent heaven, once you acknowledge that, you can navigate through all. It becomes easy. Euripides says, mighty is geometry, joined with art, resistless. Plato says it is through geometry that one purifies the eye of the soul. Whoa. It's definitely one of those Plato quotes. They imagine just being like a very simple farmer and just coming home and suddenly Plato was your neighbor and you're like, how you doing, Plato? And Plato's like, it is through geometry that one purifies the eye of the soul. The farmer's gonna be like, chill, bro. I'm just the farmer here. Ibn Khaldun says geometry enlightens the intellect and sets one's mind right. All of its proofs are very clear and orderly. It is hardly possible for errors to enter into geometrical reasoning because it is well arranged and orderly. Thus, the mind that constantly applies itself to geometry is not likely to fall into error. It is in this convenient way the person who knows geometry acquires intelligence. Guys, I think I know why Plato was saying geometry, even though I just read another quote, but let me tell you why I noticed why Plato was saying that geometry purifies the eye of the soul. Let me tell you why. Because life in its existential level, which is just being here, is just the shape. It is the movement of shape that we identify as change. So technically, geometrical change is existential change. Geometrical. The change, how geometrical shapes change, is also the same as how form shifts. Existence moves on. Pythagoras says geometry is knowledge of the eternally existent. Anthony Garrett-Lisi says, I think the universe is pure geometry, basically a beautiful shape twisting around and dancing over space-time. Interesting. Stephen Hawking says equations are just the boring part of mathematics. I attempt to see things in terms of geometry. Exactly. And guess what? What do you think happens when you tend to see language through geometry? You see the beautiful evolution of the simpler view into its more widened stance. George Polya says, geometry is the science of correct reasoning on incorrect figures. I feel I read this, but I'll read again. Geometry is the foundation of all painting. Benoit Mandelbrot. Oh, Benoit Mandelbrot. Mandelbrot was this mathematician who brought this concept of fractals. Why is he pretty much gave infinity a shape? Why is geometry often described as cold and dry? One reason lies in its inability to describe the shape of a cloud, a mountain, a coastline, or a tree. Yeah, exactly, but not in a further view. That means, I understand what he's saying. He's saying that nature can't be put into a geometrical box easily. Plato says geometry draws the soul towards truth. Plato says experience proves that anyone who has studied geometry is infinitely quicker to grasp difficult subjects than one who has not. Sophie Germain says algebra is nothing more than geometry in words. Geometry is nothing more than algebra in pictures. Yeah. Algebra is nothing more than geometry in words. Yeah, so if you wanted to wonder about the action occurring to the geometrical shape, then you could say the algebraic expression would be geometry. And then Sophie says geometry is nothing more than algebra in pictures. So geometry is nothing more than algebra in pictures. Yeah, geometry is nothing. Yeah, exactly. Geometry. What am I saying? Geometry is nothing more than algebra in pictures. Exactly. That means the shape is the picture. Louis de Bernier says the human heart likes a little disorder in its geometry. Plato says the knowledge of which geometry aims is the knowledge of the eternal. Plato's really really trying to inspire people towards geometry. Somebody's like, so what are these shapes again? And Plato's like, the eternal, man, the eternal. Mandelbrot says again, clouds are not spheres, mountains are not cones, coastlines are not circles, and bark is not smooth, nor does lightning travel in a straight line. Isaac Newton says, oh, I read this. I'll read it again. The description of right lines and circles upon which geometry is founded belongs to mechanics. Geometry does not teach us to draw these lines, but requires them to be drawn. Plato says writing is the geometry of the soul. I could totally see how writing is giving a sort of geometrical shape to the soul, if the soul was seen, it's the inner events being emotions translated. Joseph Louis Lagrange says as long as algebra and geometry have been separated, their progress have been slow and their use is limited. But when these two sciences have been united, they have lent each mutual forces and have marched together towards perfection. What incredible, this mathematician. And he's right. Literally, the image and the word. So literally, we have to use algebra and geometry to come with theoretical mathematical films. That's the key. Henry Poincaré says one geometry cannot be more true than another. It can only be more convenient. Plato says, let no one destitute of geometry enter my doors. Let no one destitute of geometry. What does that even mean? Plato really wanted geometrical friends. He's like, if you don't believe in squares, get out of this house. Destitute means without the basic necessities of life. The charity cares for destitute. Not having. So he's saying, no one who has geometry enter my doors. Let no one destitute of geometry without basic understanding of geometry enter my doors. He's pretty much saying, know your geometry, you know? Johann Kepler says, geometry is one and eternal, shining in the mind of God. Aristotle says, the mathematical sciences particularly exhibit order, symmetry, and limitations, and these are the greatest forms of the beautiful. Exactly. Because it's not that they're the greatest forms of the beautiful, they are the ultimate core, because there's a sort of symmetry, but there's also the limitation being the polarity. So it's like, while things can be symmetrical in this life, they can also be reversed, you know? So the infusion of those two, which is found in, you can totally see how science is just, in some sense, excavating from chaos new geometrical orders. Benjamin Franklin says no employment can be managed without arithmetic, no mechanical invention without geometry. Yeah, mechanical invention, definitely, yeah. You have to consider geometry. Johann Kepler says geometry is one and eternal, shining in the mind of God. That share in it, according to men, is one of the reasons that man is the image of God. So Johann Kepler didn't just see the cosmos as geometrical, he saw everything as geometrical. There are some beings like that, who there are like maybe 24/7, everything's geometrical to them. John P. Wheeler 3, sounds like a movie, says the universe does not exist out there, in quotations. He says, independent of us, we are inescapably involved in bringing about that which appears to be happening. We are not only observers, we are participators. In some strange sense, this is a participatory universe. Physics is no longer satisfied with insights only into particles, fields of force, into geometry, or even into time and space. Today we demand of physics some understanding of existence itself. And you know what he really means here? He means that science has to find, not science has to integrate its separate branches. Johann Kepler says geometry existed before the creation. It is co-eternal with the mind of God. Wow. Geometry provided God with a model for the creation. Wow. Wow. He's pretty much saying geometry was there before God. That's what Johann Kepler is saying. I honestly feel Johann Kepler's inner realms were so advanced. Oh my god, why aren't scientists talking about geometry? Oh my god. Science. Honor Johann Kepler's geometrical vision. Stephen Chu says geometry was the first exciting course I remember. Okay, thanks, Stephen. Jane Wagner, I may not be great at geometry, but I know one theorem. The longest distance between 2 points is you and your parents. Wow, this woman had an incredible mind. That means she couldn't get married to who she wanted. Arthur Cayley says projective geometry is all geometry. Henry Poincaré says, I've read that. Gustav, I've read that. E.W. Howe, I've read that. Mikhail Lomonosov, oh my god. Mikhail Lomonosov says geometry is the rules of all mental investigation. Very important statement. This is the geometrical multidimensional renaissance dawning upon us. Oh my god, guys, I never knew a person by this name existed. Xenocrates. Geometry is one of the handles of science and philosophy. Xenocrates, oh my god. Johann Kepler says geometry has two great treasures. One is the theorem of Pythagoras, the other the division of a line into extreme and mean ratio. The first we may compare to a measure of gold, the second we may name a precious jewel. Wow. The division of a line into extreme and mean ratio. Oh yeah, that means I think that what he means by that, if I remember my mathematics correctly, he means I feel he's suggesting that. I mean, think of all the ways you can break up a line, and that awareness of how many ways the line is broken up can relate back to the same overall line. So there's literally endless ways the line can be separated and have a relationship with its own separation. So what he means is that infinity. He's pointing to infinity with his geometrical finger, Johann Kepler. With geometry as his fingertip. Euclid says that if a straight line falling on two straight lines makes the interior angles on the same side less than two right angles, the two straight lines, if produced indefinitely, meet on that side on which the angles are less than two right angles. Oh yeah, yeah, I see what he's saying. Guys, he's pretty much saying like imagine a triangle. Now imagine the two sides of the triangle and imagine the two sides of the triangle based on whichever angle of the side of the triangle is lesser suggests which one it falls on. That means in the sides compared to the center of the line. I don't know. Like that's how I saw it. Shakuntala Devi says without mathematics, there's nothing you can do. Everything around you is mathematics. Everything around you is numbers. Herman Vale says, not only in geometry but to a still more astonishing degree in physics has it become more and more evident that as soon as we have succeeded in unraveling fully the natural laws which govern reality, we find them to be expressible by mathematical relations of surprising simplicity and architectonic perfection. It seems to me to be one of the chief objects of mathematical instruction to develop the faculty of perceiving this simplicity and harmony. So, guys, that's a really good point because the concept of teaching in regards to the educational system is make it simple enough to understand. That means we translate the laws of the universe mathematically. And but Herman Weld is saying with a strange simple perfection. That means no one doubts the alphabet. Euclid says, sire, there's no royal road to geometry. Jacques Lacan says a geometry implies the God, how do I pronounce this? Heterogeneity of locus. Namely, that there is a locus of the other. Okay, I gotta see how he's using these words. Hang on, folks. What is this man saying? The quality or state of being diverse in character or content. Or content. Oh, just being content. So he says that geometry implies the contentment of look. What does he mean by locus here? A particular position, point, or place. Okay. So he says geometry implies being content with a location, namely that there is a locus of the other. Regarding this locus of the other, of one sex as other, as absolute other, what does the most recent development in topology allow us to posit? Regarding this locus of the other, I think locus is his own definition. He's using it with his own definition. So he's saying this archetype of the other, kind of like he's getting into like another way of Jungian, the Jungian concept of anima and animus, the absolute other. What is the most recent development in topology allows to posit? Topology is just the comprehension of the mathematical form through higher dimensions. Pretty much, you're seeing more dimensions to the shape. So what does that mean? That means the other is infinite. That's the answer to the question. It means geometry is an endless other, endless dynamism of the other, maybe. Dean Koontz says the geometry of judgment is a circle. Hate is a snake that turns to consume itself from the tail, a circle that diminishes to a point, then to nothing. Pride is such a snake, and envy and greed. Love, however, is a hoop, a wheel that rolls on forever. We are rescued by those whom we have rescued. The saved become the saviors of the saviors. Wow, very poetic. The saviors become the saviors of the saviors. The saved become the saviors of their saviors. There was this other thing I had read somewhere where it was like this guy was talking to the future generations in a scroll, and he was saying like, we lived for you. He's talking to the future generations, and he's like, because you are going to give us eternal life, so we die for you, for the future generations. Somehow they reanimate us, or somehow it's like the death becomes like a, I don't know, technological explanation. Rudolf Steiner says geometry is knowledge that appears to be produced by human beings, yet whose meaning is totally independent of them. Interesting. That means we can't relate to it, but it's our phenomena. Jean Cocteau says the composer opens the cage door for arithmetic. The draftsman gives geometry its freedom. Robert M. Persick says, oh no, I read this. Sophie Germain says, I read that. Okay, I'll read it again. It's another version of her quote. It says, algebra is but written geometry, and geometry is but figured algebra. Albrecht Dürer says, and since geometry is the right foundation of all painting, I've decided to teach it. I've read that. Thomas Hobbes, there we go. Geometry is the only science that it hath pleased God hitherto to bestow on mankind. Gregory Benford says there was a blithe certainty that came from first comprehending the full Einstein field equations. Arabesques of Greek letters clinging tenuously to the page, a gossamer web. They seemed insubstantial when you first saw them, a string of squiggles, yet to follow the delicate tensors as they contracted, as the superscripts paired with subscripts, collapsing mathematically into concrete classical entities, potential mass, forces vectoring, in a curved geometry. That was a sublime experience, the iron fist of the real, inside the velvet glove of airy mathematics. I gotta definitely look into this man's work. Eric Bell says the Cowboys have a way of trussing up a steer of pugnacious bronco which fixes the brute so that it can neither move nor think. This is the hog tie, and it is what Euclid did to geometry. James Joseph Sylvester says the early study of Euclid made me a hater of geometry. Yeah, guys, Euclid's. It's not that it's just like it's like an ancient artifact. You gotta have the patience to look into it. Arthur Cayley says not that the propositions of geometry are only approximately true, but that they remain absolutely true in regard to that Euclidean space which has been so long regarded as being the physical space of our experience. Frederick Garcia Lorca, the two elements the traveler first captures in the big city are external human architecture and furious rhythm, geometry and anguish. Wow, guys, those three words, geometry and anguish, it is so poetic. It's like the nostalgia of burning the midnight oil, you know? Martin Gardner says there's still a difference between something and nothing, but it is purely geometrical and there's nothing behind the geometry. Guys, literally the quote after the geometry and anguish one was literally the guy said there's nothing behind geometry. Henry Poincaré says, as if it's a continuation, by natural selection our mind has adapted itself to the conditions of the external world. It has adopted the geometry most advantageous to the species, or in other words, the most convenient. Geometry is not true, it is advantageous. Okay, this quote's been coming up so many times, I feel like I really gotta look at it. So he's saying it has adopted the geometry most advantageous to the species. So he's saying whatever decision. So I mean, technically, he's saying the species has a geometry to its survival. And he's saying it's the most convenient geometrical route to survival. That means technically, maybe people are geometrically in three-dimensional space thinking about how they're going to survive till the next day. I feel geometry is going to become, it's a stranger to our world now, but we're going to become very familiar with it in 100 years. And one last quote from Ellen Hopkins. Scientists say every action initiates an equal and opposite reaction. I say that's just the start. I say every action initiates a most unequal and unpredictable chain reaction. That every filament of living becomes part of a larger weave while remaining identifiable. That every line of latitude requires several stripes of longitude to obtain meaning. That every universe is part of a bigger heaven, a heaven of rhythm and geometry, where a heartbeat is the apex of a triangle. Incredible. I have I have become her biggest fan. Who is she? I gotta really see who this person is. Do you see, when you see beauty in geometry, Ellen Hopkins, novelist. Oh, okay, she's a novelist. Okay, actually, some things we never know what they are. Anyways, guys, she has this nice quote. Okay, guys, so my attention came to the chat section. Welcome, everyone. I'm just reading from this site I just shared. I just typed geometry codes and it's from AZ Quotes. Like, I'm gonna read one last one, guys, and then we're gonna get out of this quote tunnel, you know. Marcus Vitruvius Polio. Geometry is of much assistance in architecture, and in particular it teaches us the use of the rule and compasses, by which especially we acquire readiness in making plans for buildings and their grounds, and rightly apply the square, the level, and the plummet. By means of optics, the light in the buildings can be drawn from fixed quarters of the sky. Difficult questions involving symmetry are solved by means of geometrical theories and methods. He says difficult questions involving symmetry are solved by means of geometrical theories and methods. Yeah, guys, I'm telling you, your inner realms, it's not just where parallel possibilities before you make a decision exist. It's also, it can have a geometrical orchestration. That means in our inner realms, it can be like that the inner internal object that Haeckel was spoken about in regards to this view of this depth of geometry is technically this. There is a shape to your soul in the geometrical dimension as the shape. But I'm not saying that we are pure geometry. I'm just saying there is a geometrical dimension and it has to be brought into the mainstream. People have to just realize how incredibly geometrically beautiful our cities can be, and look at what we've drawn. Like, we're just making rectangles. Really? How long? And people are like, yo man, we don't got the money and the time to make geometrical shaped buildings. We just have rectangles, okay? And I'll be like, all right, man, but don't you realize the eyes of the species matter? What you see, how the civilization makes you feel, it matters to you. And it has to matter to a level. So the values of a nation have to be considered of how children will see those values, how those people very old will see their values, and what the values really inspire the human being to do. Ralph Waldo Emerson, I'm going to read his quote. He says, "'Tis a short sight to limit our faith in laws to those of gravity, of chemistry, of botany, and so forth. Those laws do not stop where our eyes lose them, but push the same geometry and chemistry up into the invisible plane of social and rational life, so that, look where we will, in a boy's game or in the strifes of races, a perfect reaction, a perpetual judgment keeps watch and ward." So Ralph Waldo Emerson, you can kind of say he was like, he's like a mystic from the West, I would say. And he was very, I've read his other work, and he has an incredible insight to the soul of nature. He was like one of those people, you know. I want to see what Friedrich Nietzsche has to say about geometry, guys, and I'll get out of this tunnel. I just want to see if he ever talked about geometry. He had to. He can't be that level of a philosopher and not talk about geometry. I don't know. I don't see any geometry quotes. Okay, Friedrich Nietzsche says without music, life would be a mistake. So if he definitely looks at music, he's definitely looking at geometry. His philosophies definitely have a geometrical dimension. One last quote from Plato: "Geometry existed before creation." Plato's going next level. Wow, this guy's intense. Is this Nietzsche? Guys, Friedrich Nietzsche, listen to this quote. This German philosopher, he says, "Whenever I climb, I am followed by a dog called ego." Friedrich Nietzsche says, "Hope in reality is the worst of all evils because it prolongs the torments of man." This man's feeling sad today when he wrote this sentence. Friedrich Nietzsche says, "In some remote corner of the universe, poured out and glittering in innumerable solar systems, there once was a star on which clever animals invented knowledge. That was the haughtiest and most..." Jesus Christ, I gotta zoom into this. "That was the haughtiest and most mendacious minute of, in quotations, world history, yet only a minute. After nature had drawn a few breaths, the star grew cold and the clever animals had to die." Wow. Do you see, guys, there's something about philosophy that people who read Friedrich Nietzsche, they get to hit by the first wave and they don't read him further. But when you get through reading him, you realize this man eventually was looking at this incredible vastness, whether human beings were in the center of the picture or not. There was this incredible vastness that just made you feel like you're a part of something magnificent, you know? So that's the end of the quote tunnel, guys. Anybody has any questions about geometry, what a person can do with it? I have a lot of insight into geometry, guys. I'm not joking. Like a lot of my writings, there's like I could say 1/3 of everything I've written in this life has to do with geometry. We can't ignore shapes. Shapes are like the evolution of words. I want to share a chapter from my science fiction novel. Pretty much not a chapter, just a character in a certain scene. And so I'm working on this giant science fiction novel called The Messenger of Giants. And it's set in the year 5025. But before this, in a totally inconceivable way, I've written 2 books before that. And there's this one book which is called Lord Mistos the Messenger, the Geometrical Archangel. And so I pretty much, my mind took the idea of an archangel you see in religious ideology, and I infused it with a geometrical ability. As if whenever this archangel came into the room in the science fiction novel setting, there's this one kid named Farda, and Farda in Farsi means tomorrow. And so Farda is this kid, which literally, in the way the story is structured, he's this kid blessed with the God of the universe wanting to talk to him. So the whole 2 books before this main 3rd book, The Messenger of Giants, I've written, is about this kid's journey towards the ultimate God. Do you know? So anyways, there's a scene where there's this kid, his name's Farda, and this kid is literally, the way I've set him in the story, there's a god named Ferian, and Ferian is this kind of giant inconceivable bird where all its feathers are universes, do you know? And Ferian has called Farda, has called this kid. And so there's a scene where this kid is about to die, he makes a mistake, and the whole moment stops. The whole moment freezes in time, except Farda, the little kid, and the whole walls, literally the whole moment, like a simulation, becomes pure geometric. And literally, Lord Mistos, this being where his face is oscillating between pure geometrical form and suddenly a humanoid face, pure geometrical form. Do you know? And so Lord Mistos has a conversation with Farda. He freezes time, and in a geometrical dimension, he speaks to this kid named Farda. And he always says, Farda, what are you looking at? What do you see? And Farda, when he gives the right answer, he suddenly smiles, and the whole moment geometrically opens up. And literally in that instant, simply the situation is automatically handled. You know, as if the opponent just is disarmed, you know. And so this kid it's his whole journey. Eventually he meets Farian. That's the first book, which to be honest, I'm writing these books from reverse. So that was the whole point I wanted to say about geometry being animated and infused with more of an archetypal kind of situation. You know, right now you may feel like you're something, right? But now the something, we choose to see it in a character in a story context. But what if it was a geometrical context? What if when it rained you felt like a square? When the sun was out you felt like a sphere? When you were in your attic you felt like a triangle. Guys, nobody can own geometry. Nobody can own geometry, guys. People can storify it. They can attempt to own it, but geometry is a hidden mystery. It's literally like how some people would ask the religious guy, what is the soul, bro? And the religious guy would be, bro, it's a secret of the creator. What do you want me to say? Do you see? And so that's what I'm saying. It's as if somebody's saying, what is geometry? It's something, it's shape. How can you feel shape in your dimension? You don't ascribe to ideology. The whole beautiful thing about geometry that it cares for no ideological system. Do you know? That means all the ideological systems connected to the geometrical form are meaningless because the geometrical shape can be ascribed to any story. Do you know? The geometrical shape stories can connect to infinite geometry. I'm just saying, just like I've spoken in these talks, I've said we become conscious, we're not language. We become aware of language as a technology, so we're observing thought, where we are not the thought. So similarly, I'm saying now that thought that's being observed also has a simultaneous geometrical interpretation. That geometry, you don't understand. Right now, your computer screen, your desktop, your computer screen is like a rectangle. Is that like, do we attach an ideology to that? No, shapes are all around us. It is how we relate to them, how we evoke the shape in our inner realm. And those people, I would say it honestly, the world is too simpler than a savage mystery behind a door. Life has to recognize that it is an advanced civilization. That means we're always pioneers. Even the smartest thing we think we did 1,000 years, people are going to look back and it's like, how could these people live this way? So I am always, when I look at it, it's like in the future there will be those who see way more than me. So when I abide by my vision, it becomes a situation where it's like whatever you see, you see. Why have you allowed your eyes the fear of an unknown shape? Mathematics is a language, guys. Language is like, just like Friedrich Nietzsche was saying, man invented knowledge. We invented the meaning to the geometrical shape. The geometrical shape was just a shape. Really, what can you say about a square? What can you say about a sphere? What can you say about a triangle? It's just a shape. It's literally lines drawn on sand. And so it's like you take lines drawn on sand too far and you'll confuse yourself. I am not a fan of making characters out of geometry. Geometry is too great for that. It is too great for humanization. It is too great to just see your own story. Look at this. Look at this. I mean, seriously, guys, look at the wallpaper. This is a snowflake. This is a snowflake. Yeah, I don't know if the world's geometrical or not. This is a snowflake, folks. This snowflake, just to perceive it with this grid I've put here. Those people who are new to the talk, I remember posting this picture when there was only one person. So think of this, for example, this shape being in the center. So I'm telling you, imagine this is a three-dimensional kind of phenomena, this thing. Do you see the geometry in nature? This is some phenomena that nature made. So nature has a geometrical dimension to it. We can't avoid it. Okay, so it's very fair to say if nature has a geometrical dimension, if this snowflake is super geometrical, what if we think we are not geometrical beings, but we actually, like the snowflake, we are? When you see a snowman, it looks like you don't see this much geometrical design when you see the snowman. Do you know what I mean? So it is like in a certain state, pure geometry, in another state, pure story, geometry can't even be fathomed. So for me, a geometrical language would imply a language with greater dimensions, so it would be a language that has additional context that we haven't created yet. If when human beings live in a new way, then in some sense the civilization updates. Guys, I was reading the comments just to give an overall response. You see, the thing is, there's certain challenges. Okay, there's certain challenges because every human being is in some sense paving their own road in the system. So I think the best way to start thinking about the geometrical language is before thinking about how we make nouns into geometrical symbols, we got to think about how we can make verbs into geometrical symbols. And we have to decide a different universality. So for example, verbs would be curved lines and straight lines would be nouns. So in this geometrical language, anytime we see a straight line, we know it's a noun. Anytime we see a curved line, we see it's a sort of geometrical ratio with it. I'm saying there's so many ways. I just want to see 8 billion creatures attempt this. Attempt to uncover the next grand geometrical language. Geometry is, in my life, geometrical shapes have presented themselves in my unconscious. And I would say the most notable one was, and let me tell you, I'm going to tell you a dream I had in 2013. I've shared this dream in my earlier talks, but I'm going to share it here now. Guys, this language I speak of, this geometrical language, has dimensions, has context that we haven't fathomed. It's going to perhaps treat a sort of mind, body, soul to both the noun and the verb. I think what I'm trying to say is I'm going to share this dream I had in 2013, guys. I had this dream where suddenly I was conscious, like it was as if it was like early in the morning, and I found myself awake in my bed. And when I say awake, you know how some mornings your mind is awake earlier than your body? I don't know, maybe that's just me. But like some days it's kind of like it's physically it's a strange sleep paralysis, but if you don't resist it and just breathe, it becomes very natural, you know? So I'm saying something in the sense that pretty much, guys, in the dream, I hear this word, my consciousness is aware of the room, but my body's asleep. I'm aware my eyes are closed. My attention is kind of like hovering around where my head is. And suddenly I hear this word, okay? I hear this word, and the word is Lida, Li space Dah, and it's a mystery for me what this word means, you know? Later on, I get clues of it, and I kind of entertain my inner realms and get clues of what it is, but I could tell you it was that dream that inspired the whole piloting vision of our attention in the space-time continuum for me. When I use the term pilots of consciousness, it came from the dream. Anyways, I'll tell you what happened. I hear this word. For the first time in a dream, I heard a word, okay? And I say this word, it's still in the dream state, okay? Instantly, I project, I feel I'm somewhere in space. There's this kind of giant stone wall, and there's this giant inverted triangular cave. Giant, okay? Inverted triangular cave in this wall, and it went so deep that you couldn't see. It was just pitch black dark. And so I just felt a resistance. I just felt literally like how you feel a forbiddenness, a restrictionness, you know. I felt a restriction there. And so I instantly see that picture. I also see another image, and that image is not, it's kind of like the wavering reflection of a sort of humanoid, but totally different than a humanoid image. For a second, it's like these are just what my mind is projecting, okay? And anyways, I find myself back in some sense in like my room instantly, and there is a freshness. There is literally, and I remember instantly there was a projection when I said the word. And so when I was coming down, the ceiling was strange. It was like cubic but mixed with waves. So imagine, like, you know how you drop a coin in a like a still pond, you see the ripples. So it was like a rippling, like the ceiling was rippling, but it was all sort of cubes moving. I don't know how to say it. It was some sort of experience I had. And then I woke up, it was early in the morning, and I felt this strange freshness. There was as if like, it was so strange. There was something as if like it was as if taking off a heavy backpack and suddenly realizing how much lighter life can be, you know? It was something like that. So that was one experience where I had with my unconscious displaying some sort of geometrical shape to me in a dream state, you know? That's another way of we can say we can see geometry in this. We can even see geometry in our dreams, you know. And that symbol for me became very curious why the inverted triangle. And I realized triangles are actually squares. They're a crossed out square. That to every triangle there is three relevant dimensions. So in any sort of hierarchical system, there is literally, we got to see, right now they're seeing it as a pyramid, but I'm saying you're going to see it as a pyramid with not just a 2D kind of pyramid of hierarchies, you're going to see it a four-dimensional kind of four planes of morality infused with one another. So imagine four hierarchies, four pyramid kind of like hierarchy schemes. Like what I mean by that, I'm just talking about the diagram. Imagine like Maslow's hierarchy of needs or something, but imagine it on a more socio-political kind of view. So it would be a situation where people have these hierarchies in society, and so then you imagine reach the top of the hierarchy. Then you're like, then what? Then you see those in the top of the hierarchy have access to the four sides of the pyramid. Do you know? So it's kind of like fathoming this idea that back in the time when they were making the pyramids, imagine the slaves on one side of the pyramid were not allowed to see the slaves on the other side of the pyramid. You know, you can imagine a sort of division of these hierarchies, okay? So as you kind of look at a society shaped like a pyramid, you will realize what is the evolution of the ultimate peak. And that was when I looked at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I'm like, yo, look at this guy. He's totally not seeing the other side. When you reach the peak of self-actualization, you have also simultaneously reached like the bottom of a new dimension. Do you know? So it's like, you know how we say one man's trash is another man's treasure, or another man's treasure is another man's trash, like whatever? that simultaneity of seeing value in the same object. So now Mr. Within is saying there's a simultaneity of seeing a value in the same subject. So I'm saying that imagine Maslow's hierarchy had literally an inverted triangle connected to it, then another normal triangle connected to it, then another inverted, and it becomes this kind of thing where it's just becoming this whole line, this plane. So I'm saying nothing is one-sided in a multidimensional reality. You know? I'm saying, guys, the world is so much that it's like weather. You know, it's like trying to measure weather. It's like, how do we put the weather of the day in a belief system? We see the moment we do tomorrow, there's different weather, different weather, different weather. Eventually, life is no longer seen as a series of relationships of particles, and we reach the Whiteheadian process. For me, in a geometrical language, the space has to definitely be a definition. That means the emptiness of the page is a definition on its own. I feel that this geometrical language has to be simply connecting through the context of the universe. So what that means is right now we come across as concepts in the moment to ourselves. So we're like, all right, this concept's here, this sense of self is here, but how is it here? And we recognize the space. So technically, we are a geometrical separation from the earth. Think about it. An unconscious evolutionary process on nature. First, there was, I consider this the actual objective evolution, where legs, the design of limbs bloom. It blows my mind when I look at nature and I see creatures with legs. Like it blows my mind. And I don't know, like when I say blows my mind, I mean when you think about it on an evolutionary level. I mean when you see that we evolved into a creature that was no longer just like the earth. We became creatures that were able to walk on the earth, move in the earth, be mobile in the space of the earth. We literally were like, you know, it's like somehow dirt evolved into the diamond mind, you know. When you trust your inner realms, you can work with it. Anything you don't trust, you can't do. So what does that mean? That means inevitably we have to trust our life to work with it and to utilize its forces, to recognize the value of the various ways it's constituted. And it's like that moment where the person is, it's like, what was the cure to global stress and depression? Everybody realized nobody knows enough to worry. Nobody knows enough. Everybody just knows a certain range and they move forth. Know a certain range, they move forth. We're technically like a bunch of those kind of, you know, those twisting kind of like toys that walk on the table or something when you twist it. So we're like 8 billion of these toys. We're twisting ourselves, so we're walking for a certain while on the surface of this world, and eventually I feel an event should take place. I mean, so many people are partying on the weekends. Why don't we have a sort of global party? Why don't we have this sort of sense that let's get the greatest ideas out there? We have to build new dimensions to social communication, and this can only be found if people attempt the new. So it's like honor is in the new, not in the past, you know? It's not only in the past, I'm saying. I'm saying you can find honor by pursuing the new. I'm telling you, geometry is it's literally man's update on language. That's why I say language is an advanced technology. It has allowed our minds to now move as attention through geometrical avenues. What does that mean? That means anywhere you are, you can consider lines evoking. That means there's been times where I've lost my balance, and in my inner realms, I've instantly seen lines from everywhere of my own self, like literally to every corner of the room. My mind has been able to visualize it, instantly. So it's a sort of, you can say something you're adding to the moment, you know? For me, it's like, first of all, geometry is like how the mind of the child when it's born, it's just like being the whole world. It's like, what is the child's mind first? It's just being the world. So technically, your mind is getting acquainted with space first, and then what's in the space, and then identifying as a character in the space. This is why young children need to be hugged, because then they become aware of what's in the space. So, anyways, guys, this is the end of the talk. All I can say is that we should not forget geometry and what it can do for the species. We shouldn't forget that if we are the one who puts meaning into the object, if Buddha says the nature of objective phenomena is empty and we are putting the meaning, then the mind has an ability from a spectrum of choice to put the greatest meaning, the efficiency, to go forth, or the inefficiency. And I was thinking, when a civilization believes way too many arguments of an inevitable inefficiency, it'll never be efficient. So in some sense, it becomes a situation where you're like, where's the mind of these 8 billion creatures at? And most human beings are just trying to survive and get by. But I'm saying, for how long are we just going to run after our resources, not realizing the potential if we had them? So we have to build a civilization that is resourceful, that in some sense perceives human existence as a sort of tourist and manifestation, that let's try to give every human being the best kind of experience. So what does that mean? Geometrical innovation in regards to the experience of human beings in systems, and the external experience of human beings outside of a system. A bird needs two wings to fly. You can say man's mind requires two sorts of freedom. A freedom to look at all the phenomena as design, and the freedom to see how the unknown moves it. So anyways, guys, that's the end of the talk. I'm going to open it up to Q&A if anybody has a question. If not, after a couple of minutes, I'm going to tune out. So anyways, guys, it's 4:15. Let's choose a random number. 4:19. 4:19, guys. I'm going to tune out. So, Alright, everyone, I want to just say one last point about geometry. That it's the luxury, it's a privilege of our conscious minds. It is an advantage. It is something we have access to, that in the middle of this world of chaos and order and various outcomes, it's as if there is a geometry to nature. And I think the harmony of man's character with the natural world, it's bridges geometry. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Much blessings, and I'll say.